Russia investigation. A longtime aide to the president is the latest to testify into possible collusion. We have the latest. Prayers on Capitol Hill.
Give us this day our daily bread.
Catholic leaders lobby lawmakers on behalf of immigrants. Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Pilgrims hoping to pray at Christ's tomb in Jerusalem are disappointed. And get to confession, a tip from the Holy Father. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, February 27th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The Florida State Senate comes closer to passing a bill that would arm teachers and raise the age limit to buy rifles. But on Capitol Hill, the debate over gun control continues. Nearly 2 weeks have passed since 17 people were killed in a Florida high school, and the gun control debate is raging.
We shouldn't be banning guns for law-abiding citizens. We should be focusing on making sure that citizens who should not get guns in the first place don't get those guns.
The White House has yet to release specific legislation framework for any gun-based proposals, but the president pledged to eliminate bump fire stocks and called for strengthening the country's background check system.
You just got to go and check who you're selling a gun to. I mean, these are things that are just, they're not depriving anybody of their Second Amendment.
Some support raising the minimum age limit for purchasing certain types of arms from 18 to 21.
To say that you can go by on your 18th birthday, blow out the candles, and then go get a semi-automatic weapon and then turn it and put a bump stock on it and be fully automatic is just nuts.
And while the president and others have called for arming teachers on a voluntary basis, not everyone agrees.
When one holds up a gun in that situation, they might well be the person shot at by the police, believing that they are the one that is committing the atrocity.
As the debate continues, the victims of the Parkland shooting wait for change.
I feel angry. Angry that we let this happen. Angry that we did not solve this problem a long time ago.
And EWTN personalities are going to be offering a free webcast to talk about the tragedy from a Catholic perspective. Teresa Tomeo and Father Mitch Pacwa will explore why the phrase thoughts and prayers do matter in the wake of this violence. Check out our Sunday Visitors website. That's osv.com/webcasts. That will be tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. As one of President Trump's closest advisors faces questions in the Russia probe, the White House says, once again, there is no evidence of collusion. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Hope Hicks is the White House communications director. She followed the president here after working as spokeswoman on his campaign. Today she met with the House Intelligence Committee for a closed-door interview. Lawmakers want to know if the Trump campaign had any links to Russia.
I'm still not going to comment on any individual's interactions with the committee. I'm also not going to comment on leaks from what is supposed to be a confidential setting. There continues to be zero evidence of collusion, and we hope these investigations wrap up shortly.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders beating a familiar-sounding drum from the briefing room podium today when questioned about the ongoing Russia probe. The president has made clear what he thinks about the whole thing, today tweeting in all caps, "Witch hunt." Hope Hicks is the latest Trump associate to be questioned by the House Intelligence Committee. She has already been interviewed by Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor appointed to lead a federal probe. His investigation has brought indictments against several people close to the Trump campaign, including former campaign manager Paul Manafort and the president's former national security advisor Michael Flynn. The White House says none of the indictments prove Trump's campaign knowingly conspired with the Russian government to influence the outcome of the election. The other big news coming out today, looking ahead to his re-election campaign, the president has hired his former digital advisor, Brad Parscale, to be campaign manager for the 2020 run. The campaign will also be engaged in this year's midterm elections. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thank you, Mark. The NBA champion Golden State Warriors will not visit the White House this year. They did visit President Obama in 2016, but the traditional invitation from President Trump was not extended, and it's likely the team would have declined it anyway. The Warriors are in the nation's capital to play the Washington Wizards tomorrow night. Catholic leaders are on Capitol Hill today. They're urging lawmakers to immediately pass a bill to protect dreamers, the immigrants brought to the country illegally as children. But not all Catholics agree with their actions. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi is there. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Capitol Hill police tell me they arrested 40 protesters. They're asking Congress to act now to protect dreamers after the Supreme Court declined to intervene. Now, before the arrest, the rally drew lay leaders and religious.
Catholics pray outside the Capitol. They want protections for dreamers like Daniel Neri.
As Catholics, we know that one of our greatest Pope, John Paul II, he kept saying, be not afraid. But how can we not be afraid when our lives, our families are being threatened to be deported, to be, especially dreamers, to be sent to a country that we don't even remember anymore.
Daniel's parents brought him to the U.S. illegally from Mexico when he was 10. He's one of 800,000 DACA recipients able to get work permits. Daniel has a job in a Catholic parish in Indianapolis.
Today at Mass, I remember that we are one body. I was bawling my eyes in front of the Eucharist, and remember, it's like we are one body, and so what are we doing to that body of Christ?
Bishop John Stowe of Lexington took part in the rally.
Time is ticking on the DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it's unfair to our dreamers that are in our churches, that are in our pews, that are contributing members of our society, that are working, that are studying, even serving in the military, that they live in fear constantly, that their families are going to be divided, that they could be deported, and their dreams are put on hold.
After 3 warnings, Capitol Hill police arrested 40 protesters when they wouldn't leave.
Lauren, some Catholics are critical of these protesters. On Twitter, one theology student commented that it's immoral to break just laws. Another alluded to the 20-week abortion ban, asking, where were these people when 20-week-old babies were getting death sentences? And a third pointed out that immigration is a prudential judgment. That means the church leaves the faithful free to take a position, and good Catholics can disagree on this issue. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, thank you for that emotional report. For more on the immigration issue, we are joined by Teresa Cardinal Brown. She is Director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren. Good to be here.
Is there a bipartisan solution to immigration?
Well, we'd like to think so. We keep trying to tell people there is and there can be. But look, immigration has had partisan divisions for a while now. The Dreamers, we thought, were someplace that we could bring people together. You had President Trump calling for action on them, Democrats calling for action on it, Republicans calling for action on it, and yet we still reached a stalemate legislatively. So it's a little unclear where things go next.
Is this a blow to the Trump administration?
Depends on who you talk to, I think. He did say he wanted to do something for the Dreamers, but then he also had other immigration issues unrelated to the Dreamers that he insisted on in exchange for helping them. I think that requirement did make some Democrats nervous about coming on board. Even some Republicans were a little unsure about some of those provisions, and it complicated things. The original conversation was about border security money for a permanent solution to Dreamers. I think that is a proposal. $25 billion for the wall.
1.8 million.
Exactly, and a path to citizenship, a permanent solution. That's what a lot of people were asking for. It's these other provisions relating to family unification visas or the diversity program. That's what some people call it.
Right. But you're calling it family migration.
Yeah, they are legal visas that currently exist in law that allow U.S. citizens and green card holders to sponsor certain family members to join them here. It's been part of our law for well over 60 years, but the president has called for changes to that. And I think those requirements that he asked for that changes our legal immigration system, that sort of threw a wrench into the discussions on Capitol Hill.
All right, what does the Bipartisan Policy Center want to see in a bill? What do you think could get both sides together.
We actually believe that a narrower is better in this case. There's widespread support for a path to citizenship for the Dreamers. We think that proposal can get a majority. And if President Trump wants his border wall, Democrats have already indicated, well, maybe we can swallow the bullet on that one. But when you start adding these other provisions, that complicated things. I think if we could get back to a narrower bill, it might be possible to get something done, but not sure right now.
All right. This March 5th deadline that everybody has been talking about, I know I do a lot better when I have a deadline, and Congress
does too.
And now there's no deadline.
Yeah, the Supreme Court decided to send this immigration case back to the district court. They didn't act on the Justice Department's request that they take it up on an emergency basis. So that means that a lower court ruling that required the administration to continue processing DACA applications rendered the March 5th date kind of moot. So that situation is now moving through the courts. But again, as you said, and I said, Congress moves better when it has a deadline. The fact that this March 5th deadline now no longer seems to be a deadline probably means that Congress is looking at trying to figure out how to kick this can down the road.
That's right. All right. Thank you so much, Teresa Cardinal Brown, the Director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center.
Thank you.
Catholic bishops in Texas are asking churches not to work with the state's oldest and largest pro-life group. The leaders say Texas' right to life does not always align with church teachings. One Republican lawmaker says the bishops are going after a group for being, quote, too pro-life. Citing poor pay, thousands of striking school teachers are demanding a meeting with the governor. West Virginia schools have been shut down, and this strike is in its 4th day. The teachers' average salaries rank among the lowest in the nation.
We love our kids. We miss our kids. I'm in special education. I worry that my kids are not getting food every day. So it's not easy being here, but we have a passion for it.
Governor Jim Justice has approved pay raises of around $800 this year. But teachers say that's not enough. Students will have to make up for missed class at the end of the school year. After a 5-hour ceasefire designed to allow civilians to leave war-torn Syria, no one left. Buses waited to take some of the 400,000 civilians to safety. Russia brokered this pause between Syrian allies and the rebels. The international community had asked for more time to evacuate citizens. Hundreds of civilians have died in recent days due to the bombing. Armed guards kept students inside a school near the site where 110 girls were abducted last week by Boko Haram extremists. The country's president called those kidnappings a, quote, national disaster. One parent says her children are too afraid to return to school. A top Myanmar official tells the UN Human Rights Council the situation with Rohingya Muslims is political and not religious. About 700,000 Rohingya have fled towns and villages in Myanmar, also known as Burma, since August to escape a military crackdown. Christian leaders say the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem will reopen after a tax dispute with Israeli authorities. Catholic and Orthodox leaders had closed the Church of the Holy Sepulchre Sunday to protest an order by the mayor to tax their properties. The church is built on the site of Christ's burial and resurrection. Pilgrims are ready for the reopening.
Our pilgrims, of course, are extremely disappointed. We came to touch Calvary, to pray in the empty tomb, and that's the highlight of the entire trip. It's the highlight of any pilgrimage.
The church is one of the most visited sites in the Holy Land. Its closure came just weeks before the busy Easter season. Earlier today, our Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley sat down with Cardinal Edwin OBrien, head of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre. That's a group that protects the holy site. She asked Cardinal OBrien if Israel is guilty of discriminating against Christians.
Well, the government is trying to reverse policies that have been in place over 1,000 years. And they're zeroing in on Christian churches. They know that Christianity is weakened there because of the emigration, because of the limits placed on Christians by this same government. So I think they have a right to say there's a touch here of singling out Christianity for special punishment.
Why do you think that is happening?
I don't know. I don't know. Does the government want to see Christians disappear from there? I don't know what pressures the government is under. Certainly they're under economic pressures and they need more money. But as far as the attitude towards Christians, it's been a developing, a creeping thing that they have been moving in on church rights there.
What repercussions will this move have?
Oh, I think if this taxation goes into effect, we're talking about education and hospitals and works of charity of all kinds, they will not be able to continue as they are now. There'd be severe cutbacks because the monies involved are quite extensive.
Do you think there might be a link between the Trump administration's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israeli capital and this move?
There's a lot of speculation about that. The thought over there is that the government has become more emboldened since the United States commitment to move the embassy to Jerusalem. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's certainly an odd coincidence.
What do you think the outside world could do to help this situation of apparent discrimination?
This was just done arbitrarily, and I think there has to be political pressure and certainly spiritual pressure through prayer, and also personal involvement, such as I said before, the importance of pilgrimages. I think our presence there to support and to show our solidarity with the suffering Christians is very important as well.
When you talk about putting political pressure, are you in touch with Washington? Have you had contact with them to try and resolve this?
We don't get involved as an order in anything political except to let our members do whatever has to be done according to their own conscience and their own situation. The Holy See, this Department of State certainly is the one who deals with political questions, and I'm sure they're in discussions with Israel and with the leaders in Jerusalem to see if this can be resolved quickly and amicably.
Coming up, the right words. Should the U.S. talk to North Korea about nuclear weapons? And more companies boycott the NRA. South Korea is hoping that after inviting the North to participate in the Winter Games, tensions would ease. Delegations from both countries met in the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, today to talk about North Korea's participation in the upcoming Paralympics in March. Top South Korean officials say the North Koreans are willing to talk with the U.S., but President Trump says China is key to bringing North Korea to the table.
I think that President Xi is unique. He's helping us with North Korea, who, by the way, wants to talk. As of last night, you heard that. They want to talk. And we want to talk also only under the right conditions. Otherwise, we're not talking.
The State Department is losing a top diplomat in the North Korea talks this week. Joseph Yun says he is retiring after 33 years in the Foreign Service. Yun was instrumental in securing the release of Otto Warmbier, the American who died in 2017 after being jailed in North Korea. Gordon Chang is the author of Nuclear Showdown: North Korea Takes on the World, and he's an expert in Asian foreign policy. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Should the U.S. even consider talks with North Korea? Do you think that South Korea's overtures are a good move?
Well, I think the U.S. will have to talk to North Korea. We can peacefully disarm the North, especially with sanctions, and not only sanctions on North Korea, but also sanctions on those countries doing business with North Korea. That would be Russia and China. And I think at some point, North Korea will realize it has no choice but to give up its weapons. They're not there yet. We're a long way from there. But I think the North Koreans are now willing to talk to the U.S. because they realize sanctions are biting.
Well, these latest sanctions, I think, escalated the pressure. In your opinion, I'm not sure if you think that's true, but let's talk about them. Scores of companies and ships which were accused of illicit trading. And President Trump is also slamming the president on Twitter. The policy with North Korea and the White House, is it effective?
Well, it is being increasingly effective. We see this, for instance, there are reports that North Korea might run out of hard currency by October. Even senior officials in Pyongyang are not getting their full rations out of their special distribution channels. All sorts of indications that North Korea is running out of money. Now, there's a long way to go, and China can actually make up some of the shortfalls surreptitiously. What President Trump will do would make it increasingly difficult for Beijing and Moscow to support their North Korean friends. So we're actually having some effect, but we need to have much more effect.
Well, you talked about China and Russia, and we heard the president say that China has to play a big role in this. The Wall Street Journal reported that North Korea shipped 50 tons to help with Syria in this chemical weapons fight against the rebels. UN reports are also backing that up. What is a place like North Korea to do when they are approached about having chemicals like this?
Yeah, this is a UN panel of experts report, and it's good that the UN did this. But we also suspect, and there's a lot of evidence suggesting that North Korea has been selling chemical weapons to the Syrians since the 1990s, and there's been all sorts of dangerous cooperation. I'm sure that Iran's been paying for some of this, largely because Damascus doesn't have the money for it. So, essentially what Iran did was it outsourced its nuclear weapons program to the Syrian desert. The Israelis destroyed that reactor in September 2007. There's a web of relationships among Syria, Iran, North Korea, probably China as well.
And what is to be done about that?
The U.S. needs to start imposing some costs, which are really severe. So, for instance, I think that we go after the sources of money, which would be China and Iran. You do that, eventually you roll up all of these networks. Yes, we should put pressure on Syria, but nonetheless, let's start up higher in the food chain, because if we do that, they won't have money for chemical weapons.
And I think that's what President Trump was alluding to. Thank you so much, Gordon Chang, author of Nuclear Showdown, North Korea Takes on the World.
Thanks, Lauren.
FedEx says they will not cut ties with the National Rifle Association. That announcement today as companies face mounting pressure to cut ties with the gun rights group. FedEx issued a statement saying it has never set or changed rates in response to politics or beliefs. The decision received instant attention across social media, with some longtime customers saying they will take their business elsewhere. But some companies are ending business partnerships with the NRA, and they're facing backlash, including Delta Airlines. Georgia's Republican lieutenant governor is threatening to end a $50 million sales tax exemption on jet fuel for Delta. The airline is based in Atlanta. Up next, nothing to fear. Pope Francis has a message for the faithful. And Mary Magdalene in the movies, the life of one of the followers of Christ. Pope Francis says there's nothing scary about going to confession.
A me aiuta vedere questo atteggiamento del Signore.
At his daily Mass in the Vatican, the Holy Father said the Lord never grows weary of calling us to change our lives. The Pope also says those changes start in confession when our sins are forgiven. And it was just this date, 5 years ago, that Pope Benedict XVI gave his last general audience as the Supreme Pontiff. A crowd of more than 100,000 gathered that day in St. Peter's Square. It was one of his last public appearances before retiring to a life of prayer, meditation, and writing. The German Pope thanked the crowd for accepting his decision to step down. He urged the people to renew their trust in the Lord. Former President Bill Clinton pays his respects to the late Billy Graham in North Carolina. Yesterday, former President George W. Bush visited the family.
If there's such a thing as a humble shepherd of the Lord, Billy Graham is that person.
Graham's body will be taken from his boyhood home near Charlotte to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday and Thursday. He will lie in honor at the U.S. Capitol. Finally tonight, a new movie looks at the life of one of the women closest to Christ. Mary Magdalene stars Rooney Mara in the title role and Joaquin Phoenix as Jesus. Mara says playing someone who witnessed the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ was, quote, a huge responsibility. The movie will be released in the UK next month and in the US next year. How great is that, that story is being told on the big screen by big stars? For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook at Lauren Ashburn EWTN. Good night, and God bless you.